Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to take a break from the VPA series for a bit and cover some other topics that have helped me in my trading. In this video, I figured it would be useful to elaborate on a blog post I recently read from Tradytics regarding the use of dark pool data and to get good additional insight into directional trade using this data. So before we get started, if you'd like to get a 10% discount for Tradytics, don't forget to use my referral link in the description. You'll also find referral links for TradingView and Top Step funded trader programs that will give us both discounts. Lastly, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe to help me grow this channel. I only recently started reviewing dark pool data for securities and holdings that I plan to day trade, and I have to admit, I wish I would have started reviewing it sooner. The more data points we have to provide conviction on a play, the better. And if you watch my other videos, you know I like to combine fundamentals, news events, options flow, gamma exposure, and of course volume price analysis on the charts to make informed decisions about the securities that I plan to trade. I've recently added dark pool data as another data point for making those decisions, so I want to talk about how you can do the same for any ticker that you plan to trade. In my volume price analysis part 2 video, I talked about how you can use TradingView to find a good trade setup. I also plan to do a video in the near future on how you can use live flow to find a good trade setup, but in this video, I'll talk about a ticker I found bearish flow on using TradingView, and we'll discuss how dark pool levels made it easier to trade. I'll also show how nice it is to use this data for trading the main ETFs such as SPY, QQQ, ES, or NQ. So, that being said, let's get into it. So first, let's talk about what dark pools are. A dark pool is a privately organized financial forum or exchange for trading securities. Now, essentially, a lot of people think these dark pools are nefarious or shady, and I guess, I can totally see why that would be. However, the big reason for them existing is because it was found that when these large institutions such as hedge funds and banks were making big transactional trades, that it was having a massive impact on the underlying security or holdings, and it would cause either significant drops or significant rises, and it would just skew the charts dramatically. It would cause people to panic, and honestly, I know it doesn't really seem like it, but these dark pools help protect us retail traders from panicking. If we were to see these exchanges happen through normal exchanges, and we would see the way price reacted, it would scare us out of a lot of our positions. It would trigger, not only would it trigger stops that we might have, but we would see these significant drops. It could cause panic. So, you can read the official definition right here, but that's essentially why they exist. And thankfully, we can view this data using tools like Tradytics, and it makes it really easy to do so. We just need to know how to use the data. So one of the first data points that you can use is to find levels from dark pools. And so to show you how to do that, there's actually two places we can find these levels on Tradytics. So the first one would be under the options ticker dashboard. And so that's what I have up on this tab. And if you just scroll down here, now the stock price and algo flow, I've talked about this in other videos. I love this tool. I use it every single morning, and I'll just clear out the levels here. Now, you can plot normal support and resistance levels, which you can see here, which are extremely useful. But what I've started doing is I'll pull up the 30-minute chart. And again, this just goes in my morning prep now. And I'll go to dark pool levels, and I'll start from monthly and work my way up. So I'll put on monthly, weekly, and daily, and we can actually see where these levels are, and you can see that price does indeed react to these levels. Now, so this is one way to get them. This is the way that I prefer to get them, because I also use other things on this dashboard, which I've talked about in previous videos and which I'll talk about in future videos as well. If you've watched my other videos, you might know that I love to look at gamma exposure and both how the total gamma exposure, where the most gamma exposure is centered around, where we'll see a gamma exposure flip. But I actually stopped using levels directly from gamma exposure because I found that they tend to line up very closely with these dark pool levels, and I've started putting these on my charts instead. And I've been doing a lot of testing with it, and so far it's worked out really well. So this is one place you can get them. The other place you can go to get them is if you scroll down to flow, dark pool, stocks, you can pull up this dark pool dashboard summary. And once again, you can see here stock price and largest dark pool trades, and this will show you all the dark pool trades that you can pop on your charts. And once again, up here you can set the time frame of your choice to get more granular or less granular. I tend to just go to the 15-minute or the 30-minute usually and pop the levels if I use this dashboard. And what's nice about this view too is you can see the date on here, which is useful. You know, if you want to make sure that see how recently this transaction was made. So that is where I get my levels. And just to show briefly, I'll come back to this. I prefer to plot them on my chart using a gray line just because it kind of fits. I can still see it with the black background, and I know right away it's a dark pool level. And some of your brokers allow you to put text in there too, which you can see I've done. Shows up here on the right. And so that is how we can derive levels, and these levels are treated like any other support resistance level. And there's and sort of like gamma levels, the areas with the largest amount of dark pool volume also act as magnets at times. So now that we know how to grab the levels, let's get into some other ways we can use the data. So you'll see that you can also look for dark pool volume gaps, and what we mean by that is if we go to this dark pool dashboard, you can see that we have dark pool levels here, and you could see that there's two areas that had the most amount of volume for the dark pool, and then everything else in between was nowhere near as close as the green line and the white line. And so what this tells us that if we break 40-12-12, because there's a good chance that 40-12-12 will be defended because the amount of volume that occurred there, the size of the trade that occurred there, that there's a good chance that we'll fall through these other dark pool levels down to 39.04. And what's amazing is we actually did see this occur. So you can see 40-12-12, 39.04. And if we look at the chart, we have our 412 level, and we have our, if we scroll down here, once we actually broke through this, and what's nice is we typically get a retest on these levels. If we do break through, we could see it holding here, coming up to another level, coming back down, retesting, and falling. We tried to get back up and couldn't, which is a very bearish sign if you were trading this intraday, which I know I was. And then you could see and now this is also related. I'm not going to pretend that this isn't related to fundamental news, because it is. I mean, we just had CPI data. This drop here was likely anticipating that bad CPI data, and then of course inflation was higher than expected, higher than anticipated, higher than what they tell us, and we had a bigger drop. But we ended up falling through all these dark pool levels that were lower volume levels, and then we ended up bottoming at the level I had just shown you, the white line here, which is pretty fascinating. So that tells us this is a very strong level that they were coming in to defend. And so that's one way we can use these, is that we can determine strong levels and weak levels and where price will bounce between. And this data changes all the time, but chances are if we were to start moving back up and sort of stair-stepping our way back up, chances are there might be some sort of top at 40-12-12. And it's something that when you're marking this stuff on your charts, you might want to actually go through and make it a thicker line or something. I made them all the same thickness because for visibility in this video, but you can adjust that to indicate, you know, for these weaker levels, okay, this can be a thinner line, so we know that yes, it will likely be defended because big hedge funds created liquidity there through transactions that they were making with each other, but at the same time they're not going to spend billions and billions, limitless amounts of money defending that level and propping it up. So it's just worth noting, like we'll see some sort of action there. Like this was a big fall the other day based off anticipation of fundamental news, yet when we hit that level we still had a reaction, which tells you that these levels do indeed come into play. So the next thing that we can use from dark pool data is gauging sentiment. And when you're looking at the dark pool dashboard, you can actually get an idea if big money is feeling bullish or bearish towards the particular ticker that you're assessing. So, and this is also really interesting. As many of you know, we kind of hit what I believe to be a temporary bottom. Who knows? It could be the real bottom, but I doubt it. But we hit a temporary bottom right around May 23rd. If we pull up the chart here, we can check to actually get an idea. So, oh, sorry, May 20th, which is really fascinating. So May 20th, you can see this was our recent bottom in this bear market that we've been having, and sure enough, May 20th is when the sentiment shifted from bearish to bullish. So if we were looking at this dark pool data and we were seeing multiple green days, and again, I wish I had known about this sooner, because I really could have used this, especially for maybe holding some sort of short-term short-term call on SPY. I mean, it's a little risky until we get a couple green days at least, and of course you don't want to hold it very long. But what's fascinating about that is May 20th, the sentiment prior to this had been bearish, and then we shift green, and the dark pool sentiment kept shifting bullish and kept getting greener and greener every day, and sure enough, we were moving up and moving up. Now, we eventually capped out, and that again, we were just sort of in this sideways chop until CPI data was released, and that's certainly what big money was waiting for. But this works for other tickers as well, where you can gauge the sentiment based off the dark pool data, which is amazing. And then sure enough, on June 2nd, which if we pull up on the chart here, now this is when we were chopping around and we were just going sideways, but we can see that sentiment started to shift. Now, it wasn't as big, but I mean, this is a pretty significant drop off when you have this large bullish sentiment and then it goes slightly bearish. And we did have one green day here, which is kind of strange. I mean, that's why it's always important to make sure you check out multiple days worth of data to get a true idea of things. I mean, it's really odd that we'd have a bullish sentiment day on June 9th, considering that the chart was telling us that they were anticipating bad news, which certainly we ended up getting. But it does help us tell us, like, okay, we had that bullish run up, and then things start dying down, and then we start chopping sideways, and the dark pool sentiment is confirming this, which is incredibly useful, especially when you're doing a weekly or daily analysis going into the day. I highly recommend checking dark pool sentiment as well as gamma exposure at the start of every day. Now, there's another aspect to this, and I should mention that dark pool data on its own, we cannot gauge sentiment from. Dark pool data does not give us a sense of direction. There are actually, all we really know is how much money was spent at which price point. So the only way that we can truly gauge sentiment from this data is from what we see as block trades. Now, you can read here, it's a large privately negotiated securities transaction that is broken up into smaller orders and executed through different brokers to match the true size. Now, these block trades can also be done outside of normal open exchanges through private purchase agreements, just like a dark pool transaction, which is why they are shown in this dark pool dashboard. And now, the nice thing about these is we can actually truly gauge sentiment. We can tell if it was bullish or bearish based on the type of trade that was done. And of course, you can see here, this does line up with the dark pool sentiment to the right, because my assumption is, I don't work for Tradytics, but my assumption is the sentiment that they're showing here, this has an influence over that. And it shows exactly what we were talking about, how we had this bullish shift in sentiment, and then we started shifting back bearish with a weird green day. But block trades can happen the same way as dark pool trades off of normal open markets, and they can be private purchase agreements, but at least we have more data about them. We can get a better idea of what the sentiment of that transaction was. So This is another very useful thing to look at. Again, whenever you're assessing a ticker that you want to trade, I highly recommend making this as part of your morning routine once you've built your watch list coming into this dark pool dashboard, and not only looking at levels, but looking at what the strongest levels were and getting an idea of the sentiment to make sure, for instance, if you pick up a trade on TradingView and it's saying that you're seeing 30 puts bought, you want to make sure that that dark pool sentiment is lining up with what you're seeing on that flow data as an extra point of confirmation and confluence. So now I already touched on this with SPY, so I won't go through it again, but when I was looking at the SPY data, you saw me plotting the levels, and I wanted to talk about a second. I trade futures primarily. I did trade both futures and SPY today. I do that sometimes. I have my options account and my futures account. Now, when I'm on my options account, I actually do like the idea of trading individual tickers rather than indices, just because like while I'm looking at futures, I can use those futures, those indices, to gauge the sentiment of other plays that I found, and therefore it makes more sense to take directional plays on other tickers that are not the primary ETFs. Now, if you're like me, I just want to show the quick calculation that I use. So if I'm plotting levels on ES from dark pool data, I take, and the same applies to RTY from dark pool data, which correlates with IWM. You multiply it by 10, and that will give you your levels. So just to show you what I mean by that, if we have a level of 38.960, 389.60, all that would really line up to be is 3,896 on ES, and same with the other levels you see here. 389.90 would be 38.99 on ES. So it's very straightforward for that. Now, QQQ to NQ is not nearly as straightforward. Whenever you're plotting levels, I found that the most accurate calculation I can find is by multiplying the value, the dark pool level, by 41.02 on NQ, which will give me that level. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick in case you plan to trade futures using this data, which I personally can vouch for. It does indeed work, and it helps me be consistently profitable. So I just wanted to take the time to also show, as I mentioned, this does not only apply to indices. So if we pull up Facebook here, this was a play that I found. Now, the other day when I was looking at it, it was actually bearish on TradingView, and I'll go back to that point here. And what I ended up doing, it was on June 8th, 2022, and what I ended up doing was the same thing I just shown. I went into the options ticker dashboard. I went through and set the granularity to 30 minutes, set my dark pool levels to monthly, weekly, and daily, and plotted those. And then I also made sure that like the gamma exposure lined up, that the normal research I do before trading any sort of ticker, and then going into the dark pool dashboard, just making sure that we search Facebook and ensuring that everything I just talked about with sentiment and all of that, that the dark pool sentiment was indeed bearish, to get an idea of what the strongest support would end up being. Because obviously, if we plan on trading puts, if we plan on buying puts because we have a bearish outlook on a ticker, we want to know where the strongest support's going to be that we need to break through to really get a big move. So I ended up plotting those on Facebook just to show you. And what's amazing about this is if you combine this with volume profile, and if you haven't seen my volume price analysis series, I do dedicate a whole video to using volume profile. It is an incredibly powerful tool. And as you can see, if you combine volume profile alongside the dark pool levels and we have a bearish sentiment, what we're essentially looking for is, I always wait for, if I'm buying puts on something, I always wait for it to pull up and then come back down. And the opposite is true. If I plan to get calls, I always look for a move down before going back up. And so you can see once it starts breaking through these dark pool levels and retesting, these are great times to buy puts. And actually what was really amazing was, So TradingView, it can sometimes take a couple days to pan out. It just shows unusual transactions. So on Facebook, you can see on this day where things really did start looking bearish, and we tried to pull up. We bounce off a dark pool level, get a nice down move, and we try to pull up again to this dark pool level, which was the noted as the strongest one, which at this point is now resistance, and we plummet. You could take profits at a lower dark pool level, and then we just can start making lower highs each time, which certainly is bearish price action. And at that point, just taking profits at dark pool levels that are below it and working its way down. And what's nice too is you can use your volume profile, value area high, POC, and value area low as price targets and levels as well. And between the levels that you derive from volume profile and dark pools, I'm starting to realize you really don't need much else. It's actually pretty astonishing how powerful these tools are together. So I just wanted to show that. Again, we get a drop off, a pullback, and then a move lower, and we don't hit support until we get to our value area high. And then at that point, as with the rest of the market, we just proceed to chop around the value areas today, which these value areas will certainly come into play next week. I have no doubt about it. And there might be new dark pool data as well that we need to take into account. But I just wanted to show quickly how you can use dark pool levels with volume profile to take intraday trades and be very successful. And if you have a bearish sentiment, I would not recommend trading against that sentiment. So you just wait for pullbacks, holds at key levels, and then drops. And it's just such a nice, powerful way to trade this stuff using levels that are going to be incredibly strong. So the one thing I just want to touch on is, of course, never use this data alone. It's very important to pair market news. Another thing that I liked about Facebook when I saw it pop on TradingView was they recently had some bad news, which of course is bearish. What could be interpreted as bad news, which was bearish. They had bearish flow. They had bearish gamma exposure. The dark pool sentiment was bearish. And if you looking at the charts it's also been in a downtrend on the higher time frame. So it's just, can't stress, it's very important to always correlate other data points. Do not just use dark pool data and expect to be successful, especially if you're trading individual tickers such that are not primary ETFs. If you're trading the primary ETFs and you are playing level to level, again, dark pool, you still want to make sure you correlate, engage macroeconomic events and things like that, but dark pool data, I'm finding, can make up a large part of your strategy. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful and you learned something new. If you did, again, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share it around. I plan on doing more videos like this as I get away from the volume price analysis series. Definitely check out that series if you're trying to get a better idea of how to be a successful trader. I made those videos for a reason. That's the way I trade, and it's a way a lot of professionals trade, using volume and price action. And I truly believe it's one of the keys to becoming a successful trader. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I really appreciate you watching.